One.
Coming to you live from deep within a snow, moldy, and icy radioactive wasteland. We're the survivors of the alt-right tech apocalypse, the few, the brave, the bitchy, once more wading into battle against the horny lobster hordes with Rantzerker number 236. What do romance novels give women that men don't? I'm your host, Alison, and with me is she who must be obeyed, Karen, and the indomitable Brian on the knobs and whistles and switches. Okay, so let's just should we get right into it, or maybe I'll ask the burning question that I had.
I have that. I have the language button.
Yeah. Just randomly hit that button to prove he has it. Okay, so well, was there anything of worth at all in this, Brian? Give us an overview.
Well, it's a Manifestelle video, so that depends on what you think is worth. But I mean, I think there's definitely some rage bait, and it seems appropriate for the kind of show this is. So yeah, that's all I'll say. I don't want to spoil anything, but I think you can guess what Manifestelle's thesis is.
Well, I'm looking at the takeaways now. One that stands out to me is the historical context of romance novels reveals their role in challenging patriarchal norms.
Either that or men just suck and women have to read about good men instead of the sucky ones that they're stuck with.
That they just imagine in their mind in every capacity, physically, mentally, emotionally. There's actually no man in there. It's all women. All right. So shall we start with a clip before, or shall I do the
let's
things?
Start. Yeah, do the things, and then we'll play her little opening so you guys can get a sense of the setup.
Okay. All right. So if you, at any point throughout the show, you want to send us a tip and a message with that tip, you could do so at feedthebadger.com/justthetip. Very best way to send us whatever tip you want to send us. And probably the best way for you to send us a comment, since it avoids YouTube's comment wood chipping. So once again, that's feedthebadger.com/justthetip. And if you'd like to support the show to make sure we can give you this delectable content every month, you can do so at feedthebadger.com/support. Every bit helps. So $5, $10, if you have it, please throw it in the hat at feedthebadger.com/support. All right, Brian, let's just do it. Do it.
Okay, let's take a listen to the beginning.
Love sells, but did you know it's a $1.4 billion industry? That's more than mystery, sci-fi, and fantasy combined. And for millions of women, romance novels aren't just stories, they're an escape. In a world where finding a good partner feels harder than ever, fiction offers the love, passion, and respect that reality so often withholds. But here's the twist. The romance we escape to was never just ours. It's been packaged and sold to us. We were promised love as a reward for playing by the rules. Be beautiful, be selfless, be the perfect woman. And this commodified fantasy of romance isn't about connection, it's about control. And while we're devouring these stories to...
I'm sorry. This is a genre written in almost entirely, exclusively by women for women. It is women giving women what they want. And they do it so well that romance fiction is not just the number one selling genre of fiction, it outsells all other genres combined. Mystery, literary fiction, like lump in every other genre, young adult, right? Lump in all of them. Okay? Romance outsells it. And I'm sorry, you can't blame patriarchy for women giving women what they want to read.
Oh, yes, you can.
Yeah, you can always find a way.
And by the way, right? 99% of romance written since like the 1980s does not have a perfectly gorgeous female, like a heroine. Does not. She's never perfectly gorgeous. She's never, Mary Sue, Pollyanna. She's never like, some of the best romance novels I've ever read were women who were kind of Jane Eyre-ish, a little bit plain, you know, and
They were a
and
vessel for the reader to put themselves into.
that's
Basically.
that's exactly what it is.
Yeah.
And you know, like you have entire genres of romance, particularly eroticized highly eroticized romance, like erotic romance and romantica, that have like big beautiful woman, right? The man is usually close
Always.
to perfect, right? Like, you know, sometimes he'll have he'll have to walk with a cane, like Dr. House, because he got injured in battle or something like that, right? But
saving an orphanage and a nunnery at the same time, usually.
yeah. But, you know, and sometimes he'll have personality quirks that are like he's arrogant or whatever, but generally he learns how to be a better person through his relationship with the woman, right? And he earns her. And so it's like he earns her love. Often romance novels force the man to really prove himself worthy of her love and affection and all of that stuff. And it's just like, yeah, no, don't give me this bullshit. 50 Shades of Grey wasn't written by a man.
Yeah. No, and if you actually look at 50 Shades of Grey, that protagonist, there is absolutely, she is nothing. She doesn't have any interesting hobbies, from what I remember. Well, they weren't interesting, so I didn't remember them.
Who are we talking about? Who?
Anastasia Steele, the protagonist of 50 Shades of Grey.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, Karen, just maybe don't eat your mic, whatever it is you're doing. But
Sorry.
she is nothing. She has no interesting qualities. She's not described as attractive. In the movie, she is not, well, I mean, she's cute, but she's certainly not a Hollywood beauty.
Yeah.
You know, and it's so I don't even right off the bat, Manifestelle is full of crap. And it's interesting that she's creating this framing. I don't know why, because romance, like Karen was saying, specifically has genres that cater to whatever flaw women think that they have or do have, right? If if you're overweight,
if you're a little nerdy and bookish,
yes, you can find one.
Yeah,
you know, and even worse, like the personality flaws. If you're a control freak, if you're incapable, if you're a freaking histrionic, you'll find your place. And it's this entire, well, not the entire, because I've actually found romance that does, because the thing is that romance is in the genre called buddy love, or it's supposed to be. It usually doesn't, it fails really badly, but the idea behind buddy love is that both of the two characters are both their primary antagonists, but also the person that they need to grow the most. So that the process of the story, they learn to put the relationship be ahead of themselves individually. And that applies to buddy cop comedies and that kind of stuff. Even like The Terror. If you guys have watched The Terror, which is not a documentary, but a dramatization of the attempt to get through the Northwest Passage of, I believe, the British Navy. And it is a story between these two male characters. One is I believe, the overall captain of the expedition and his second in command. And they are all up to the point where they get to the survival situation. They are completely at odds. They hate each other. And the story is about them overcoming that and growing close as friends, right? So that's the kind of genre it's supposed to be in. And sometimes you find a romance that actually plays true to that. So for one I'm thinking about, which is probably one nobody has heard of, I don't even remember the name of it, but the female character met the male character in a sort of a scientific retreat and found out that he was being brainwashed and used by the government. And the entire story is her attempting to rescue him from this situation. And it is actually pretty harrowing how much she has to do. And she only manages it because of the charity of friendships with men that she makes along the way. And her end reward is that she gets him to safety in like this rehabilitative home, he doesn't remember her at all.
Yeah.
You know, but he's safe. And that is actually more in line with what romance is supposed to be than a lot of the stuff that Manifestelle is talking about. But of course, she would probably read that story and instantly fall into a coma of like, oh my
I
God.
can't believe patriarchy foils the woman and doesn't reward her hard work yet again.
Well, it doesn't reward. Well, I mean, she did get a reward, but the whole thing was about her hero's journey, right? Her standing up to all of this bullshit. And it's actually one of the only romance novels that explicitly acknowledges the because she's part of a more of a conservative culture, but she acknowledged that because she was part of a more patriarchal culture, she got away with more as a woman. She acknowledges it in text.
Yeah.
I was
Yeah,
like,
yeah.
whoa, my good gosh, I've never read a romance like this. So there are some of them out there. But for the most part, they're just wish fulfillment for women written by women. And of course, Manifestelle sees patriarchy in that. Did she ever explain, Brian?
Well, let's I
let's-
think
Let's-
that yeah, let's listen to more of the video. Okay. So let's finish this intro. I think it's almost done anyways.
Feel seen, we're also being told what we should settle for in real life. But what if we stopped buying into their version of love and wrote our own instead?
So, okay, so she's basically going to propose. I'm going to jump ahead to the first time code here. That essentially romance novels have not served women in the past, even though we just talked about, firstly, that they're written by women for women most of the time. And secondly, that they are like the biggest market. And when it comes to fiction, period, like bigger than everything put together. And I want to, I'm not going to say it now, but I want to add something to that I think is often overlooked in terms of why the romance genre is so big. But let's get to where because she does like an ad read for Better Health, which apparently she's not getting. And and I should open up the did you already plug the super chows? I should open up
Yes,
this
but
one.
I before we continue, I just wanted to say, like, great job on Karen's avatar. She's in the kitchen too, which is
I
where
put
she
her
should
in the
be.
I put her in a kitchen from the 50s. So I
Oh,
thought that
awesome.
would be funny. It's a really
That's
nice
great.
kitchen. I kind of wish I had one like that, but yeah.
Yeah, me too.
Yeah, it is.
I can't see it, but
yeah,
I
if you watch the
definitely
video
know.
later,
I
you'll
definitely
see it.
know that's the kitchen that I want. Yeah. if it's even remotely nice, like if it's even like just a plain typical apartment galley kitchen, I'll take it over what I got.
It's styling. It's got the seafoam green and the period refrigerator, interestingly in red,
Tile,
and
checkered tile floors,
like a diner, and then leather stool seats. It's nice, and some I see some what is it, that dimpled steel like accents, very nice.
All right.
It's not, I don't think that the colors are bright enough to be truly 50s retro, but it's getting there. Probably.
Well, I didn't want it to contrast too much and clash with the cartoon.
Yeah,
Karen.
exactly.
So,
Not blaming your aesthetic choices.
Yeah.
I understand, but it's nice, and it's adorable too, because you see Karen with her little bottle of wine and her mouth moves, but she looks like a badger. Okay.
All right.
All right. Let's play she's going to get into the topic now.
To the topic, let's talk romance novels. As the name suggests, this genre revolves around topics of love and romance. In short, love stories, whether that's young adult romance or YA, rom-coms, dark romance, romantasy, and many, many more. But before we get into all of that, it is worth backtracking to see how this genre came to be. We can actually trace the origins of the modern romance novels we enjoy today back to the 18th and 19th centuries. The first ever romance novel was published by English writer Samuel Richardson titled Pamela, or Virtue Rewarded, which tells the story of a young woman who attempts to resist giving her virginity to a wealthy landowner. So, very interesting that this was their definition of romance.
So did you see where she's sort of poisoning the well by saying, "Here's the
Yeah,
first
but-
book," and go
And
ahead.
also,
she-
I don't think that's right, is it?
Does she end up with the wealthy landowner, or does she get rescued from her horrible fate by a different man?
We could look it up.
Yeah.
What-
Or was
Um,
or
I'll
was
look
she
it
just
up.
being recalcitrant?
You could look it up. What's
I'm
the
like-
name of the? Do you remember the name?
Virtue Rewarded, I think.
Yeah.
Okay, so published in 1740, Pamela is an epistolatory novel, a story told through devices such as letters, journal entries, and other documents, recounting the story of a 15-year-old maidservant who becomes the subject of repeated sexual advances and harassment by her employer, Mr. B. Pamela struggles to avoid Mr. B's attempt at seduction, which escalate to an abduction and an attempted assault. Pamela's commitment to her virtue is rewarded as Mr. B reforms and offers to marry Pamela and elevate her social station. Pamela accepts and spends the rest of the novel adjusting to being an upper-class lady. My dear, this is more wish fulfillment. I don't care if it's
Yeah.
written
Yeah.
by Samuel Richardson. Samuel Richardson was obviously listening to his daughters or sisters or maids. Like, seriously, this is
Yeah.
this is basically 50 Shades of Grey written
No,
in
this is-
1700s.
It's Cinderella.
Yeah, but with a little bit more, a more aggressive man, shall we say?
There you go.
But
Yep.
it's saying keep, like, it's actually saying exactly the same thing that Manifestelle says, except more in the 70s, the 17th century idiom. Like, it's saying, don't give your sexuality away for free, ladies. That's exactly Manifestelle's message. Why does she have a problem with that? I'm guessing
Yeah.
because she only ever read like 2 sentences about the book.
Yeah.
Yeah. Like, Manifestelle, Pamela kept what would be kept her
Chastity
trousseau.
intact.
She kept her trousseau and got his trousseau. Isn't that your classic statement? Keep your bag and get his bag. That's what she did.
Yeah.
Like, do you see what I'm saying, Brian? Because we've done a lot of Manifestelle, Karen, and her favorite saying is "Keep your bag and get his bag."
Yeah.
That just sounds
get that
like
bag while
she doesn't
holding on to her
sound
old bag.
like. Is she a feminist or is she just like a gold digger?
Yes.
Yes.
Both?
Yes.
Both. I mean, probably she's an opportunist that will use feminism to like line her pockets, but again, that's not really antithetical to feminism anyway. So since feminists themselves are like gold diggers necessarily, like they use their ideology to line their pockets and keep them rich.
Yeah, it's just they're not
Buy
attractive
large
enough
mansions.
yeah, they're not
Yeah.
attractive enough to like get an Elon Musk to impregnate them.
No.
So
Okay, so I just want to say that is not the first romance book.
Okay.
I think romance has been around for as long as there have been stories, right? I mean, maybe it was the first that was written as a book, but there are earlier works that go back to ancient Greece and Rome.
Mhm.
yeah.
So right off the bat, she's full of shit. She's altering what it means to to what you would call a romance novel. Like the definition of a romance novel might be something that came out after the printing press, and I don't know, but
it probably would have come out after the printing press and modern bookbinding. So
yeah, exactly. So they're one strong candidate for an early work of romantic with romantic elements, or that's a romance story, would be Daphne and Chloe, written by the Greek author Longus around the 2nd century CE. It's a pastoral romance that tells the story of two foundlings, Daphne and Chloe, who grew up as shepherds on the island of Lesbos, fall in love and face. So they had lesbian stories like that. Some of the earliest ones.
Yeah.
Okay, fall in love and face various trials. There's also Greek novels like Leucippe and Ctesiphon by Achilles Titus, the Ephesian Tale by Xenophon of Ephesius. So it goes on. I mean, you could say that even the story of Hades and Persephone, right, is a romance. So yeah, this is not the case. She's just wrong. It goes. There's
romantic literature is ubiquitous throughout history.
Yes.
So
yes. So yeah. So okay. So here's where this book she's talking about comes in. So if we're looking for something closer to the modern romance novel, prose fiction focused on a romantic relationship with an optimistic ending, we need to jump to the 18th century. Many literary historians point to Samuel Richardson's Pamela or Virtue Rewarded 1740 as a pivotal test. So, but again, there are older, and some argue that Pamela is actually more about morality and class than it is about romance. And the tone can be felt the tone can feel didactic. If you want a purer romance, you might look into later 18th century works like Fanny Burney's Evelina, 1778, which follows a young woman navigating love and society, ending in a happy marriage. So, and then there's Pride and Prejudice. So
the Brontes and the well, but she wants.
She should have done that Lesbos one.
If she doesn't, well, but then how's she going to get his bag? She's like the dog with a bone in its mouth that walks over the
Alison,
bridge.
you're gone for some reason. Why'd you disappear? People might not be able to hear you. Let me.
Yeah, no, she's back.
Yeah. Did you drop out for a second? Hold on. I gotta add you because if you're not in here, then nobody can hear you talk. So give me a second. Yeah.
Well, no. Yeah, but
I'm not sure. I'm not sure. Just if you drop out again, let me know when you come back because I'm looking at 3 screens at the same time. All right, you're back now.
All I gotta say is Manifestelle is like that dog with a. Well, okay, you go ahead and make your point, Alison, because.
All right, so I don't know if you guys heard me when I dropped out, but I basically said that Manifestelle wants romance. She wants a romantic relationship, but without another person in it. And she wants to get men's bag, but she doesn't want to have the man involved in getting the bag at all. She doesn't want to have to appeal to men to get their bag. She should just walk down the street. She could go to Wall Street, in New York and walk down, and all of the traders should just hand her a bag for existing. And also that should happen to all women. And that would be a non-patriarchal society. Except why do men have the bags to hand to women in the first place? The bag should never have even touched a man. Like
oh my god.
All right.
No, what she wants a romance like that dog walking across the bridge, in that fable where he's got a bone in his mouth and he looks over the bridge into the water and sees another dog with a bone in its mouth, and and when he goes to steal the bone from that dog, his bone goes into the water, right? Because it was a reflection of himself. That's the love that she wants. She wants both bones. She wants the bag in the mirror to be real.
Yeah. Yeah, she wants to get the bag from herself with no intercession of anybody else, but not actually have to do it herself.
Yeah.
Just by virtue of the value that she brings to the universe.
Yeah.
All right.
I don't know.
Let's listen to some more of this. I jumped ahead a bit, so.
Eventually, new authors emerged, ones like Jane Austen and Anne Radcliffe, who wrote about the daily lives and struggles of female protagonists. And this shift from Radcliffe and Austen reflects not only a shift in the stories that were told, but a deeper shift that saw women using romance novels as a tool to challenge the patriarchal norms of their time. And nowadays,
To challenge the patriarchal norms of their time.
Like what? Being an adult female child of a wealthy family and having all your shit paid for until you finally fucking settle on Mr. Darcy?
Don't
And then continuing to have all your shit paid for, or what? Or whatever that dude's name was.
I don't know if this is true, and it may not be, but don't a lot of romance novels, especially these sort of Victorian ones, involve women of high status? They're not really about like peasant women or like working class women.
Jane Eyre was a working class woman. She was like hired as a governess, right, for Mr. Rochester or whatever. And but yeah, no, it's typically it's aspirational in the sense for the reader, in the sense that most of these people are, you know, and you can really tell through the 1800s, right? And that even like writers like Charles Dickens, right? You know, there was always some Deus ex machina, right, at the end. That Alison dropped out again, by the way. At the end of the story, like it turns out, you know, again. It turns out
Alison's dropping again. But go ahead, finish your point. I'm just going to be on the lookout for when she comes back. It
turns out Pip, you know, he ends up being, you know, sponsored by some wealthy person. So I mean, he can buy his papers back from, he was going to be learn a trade. So he was an apprentice, and apprentices are generally treated like crap, right? And he had a wealthy patron who basically said, no, you don't have to live like this, right? And paid his way through life. And, you know, so it's all of these kind of rescue stories, right? You know, like when it is even about Oliver as well, you know, turns out, oh, the rich man down the street was this orphan's real grandfather or whatever, right? You know, as it turns out. And so you have all of these stories that it's just, they really are Cinderella stories, where women or sometimes boys go from scrubbing floors to, you know,
living in the castle.
Yeah, learning that living in a castle, and, you know, and marrying somebody who, for the females, for the women, the heroines, marrying somebody insanely wealthy, right? And that's just how it is. She's back.
Yes,
yeah, I see. Good.
Yeah, I noticed that my internet's cutting out. It's probably just another situation.
Is your cat playing with your freaking cords?
No, actually, I think it was cutting out before then. Although she did play with my cords, which might have been a contributing factor. But what happens is that everything sort of thaws, and now it's gone cold again. So there's probably ice on the lines, which is breaking them. Apologies, guys. It's just basically rural Canadian internet. We might do better with just tin cans and strings. But anyway, let us continue.
All right. Okay, Karen.
I think
were you done?
In the sense that it, like in 18th in this era of literature, whether it's just Charles Dickens or Jane Austen, or, you know, the Bronte sisters or whatever, whenever it's centered around a protagonist that is down on their luck, even the erotic romance novel Fanny Hill, right? She ends up marrying the rich guy, right? And, you know, with orphans like Oliver Twist, he ends up actually being the real grandson of the rich guy, you know. So Pip gets his wealthy patron who buys him out of his hardships, and it's just this is, I mean, when you have so many people in those positions of being working class, and that's a real struggle, you know, during that period of time. You're going to have stories like this, and they are very romantic, and they are very like Cinderella like, you know, where she went from scrubbing floors to, you know, to dancing with a prince at a ball because of a fairy godmother, right?
Right.
Yeah. So
Okay, so I want to say that, but okay, so what's Manifestelle's point though? What is her angle? Why does she basically poisons a well by citing this is how it started, and she goes with let's say cherry picks a certain author that fits the definition of what she's saying when she says, oh, the earliest example of romantic literature can be tied to this story, and this is what it's about, you know, and she doesn't tell you the whole story. She just sets the framing to say, look, this is a patriarchal romance novel, and then goes on to like say, well, it evolved from there. And somehow, and this is the thing that I think is kind of weird, is that she's telling us that because more women writers got involved in writing romance novels, they use romance novels as a way of fighting the patriarchy.
no, they don't.
But that's what she's
claiming. They absolutely don't.
I know,
but-
I know. But that's her claim. And then, but what's weird about that is that she's also going to claim later that that thing that she just claimed that these later romance writers did hasn't happened because now women have to do it. So it's like a thing that happened, but then it didn't happen because we need to do it now. But that's like her thesis, is that women, modern women, have to write romance novels that apparently are not about men at all somehow, and don't involve
it in one, huh?
but
Well,
yeah, so
I mean, they are and they aren't, right? They are centrally, like, the main protagonist of a romance novel written for women is the female protagonist. That's just how it is.
yeah.
Right? So I mean, like, the man is in the secondary role. He's the she's the lead actor, and he's the supporting actor in the story.
Yeah, for sure. Absolutely. I got a super chat from Senior Sticks. I actually had another one that I didn't read from before. I should go back. I kind of missed it. But Senior Sticks says for $2, Markle is a modern day example and she failed. Yeah, like Meghan Markle. Then there was something, I think it might have been him again. Let me just double check here. He said for $2, could the feminists adapt in times before now? I'm not sure what that is in reference to, but I think that before modernity, women were more, they were just too busy to worry about this shit. And generally they were just like men, you know, like we didn't have the luxury to complain about like our status, which I think is ultimately what this is about. So
yeah, my grandmother, she read a lot of romance novels, and she would sit down for about half an hour a day with a romance novel, and that was her break. She'd have a cup of tea and read a few, you know, a couple chapters of her latest romance novel, and then she'd always write in the inside cover, you know, give it a rating, and you know, like V dot good meant it was pretty kinky, and pretty hot and steamy, and like a weak cup of tea was like a bad rating. So she was definitely, I mean, Grandpa had his porn. We found them one day, his magazines, and Grandma had her porn, and you know, but
And so
yeah,
she
no,
was.
she was way too busy to really to focus on romantic life, right? It was always family, and then, you know, even when she was raising young kids, work, right? So like work running the general store, work running the post office, that kind of work, as well as, running a household and raising a family.
I just wanted to point out that I think I called it earlier that she wants a romance without the man, essentially. And I think she also wants to be able to compete with other women based on how good her man is, but also without the man.
Yeah.
She wants to be able to get a man who is make all of her friends jealous, right? But
without
she doesn't
actually existing.
But without actually existing, because then she would actually have to compete with other women for him. That's the female dating strategy. That's one of the things that I noticed is that they want what they call a high value man, which would be a man that many, many women are after, but they don't want to have to deal with the fact that many, many women would be after him.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Oh man. Okay.
Well, this is all based in evolutionary psychology. Like, don't like evolutionary psychology / reproductive strategies that are biologically based. So
yeah, it's not very. It's leading now to the destruction of the human race. But
it's twisted out of shape at the moment by people like this woman on the screen here. But yeah, no, like the criterion. Wanting a high value man has changed, right? As women price themselves out of the regular market of the regular ordinary man, they've priced themselves out of that market because they can earn just as much as a man. So, they need a man who earns more, and they won't settle for anything less. So it's like, what are you going to do, right? The whole thing is being perverted and twisted out of shape.
Yes,
so.
absolutely.
Let's do some more.
Let's listen to the next time code.
Romance genre is as big as it is in the first place, like $1.44 billion big. As I've mentioned earlier, romance novels, the vibe is escapism. Romance novels provide readers with a sense of escapism. Author Jamie Gold writes that escapism brings readers into a world different from their day-to-day lives, and often these worlds are designed to be better than a reader's reality. So for those who live in a world where genuine emotional connection is scarce, romance novels offer that much-needed sanctuary. From the super attractive male lead to the passionate love story, these books paint a picture of romance that feels almost magical, allowing readers, particularly women, to experience relationships that are free of the monotony, emotional labor, and unfulfilled expectations of real life.
I'm just pausing there. There's more to it than this.
Sure. But I mean, like, that's the whole reason why you read books. Like, and nobody in their right minds would want to replace themselves with some of the main characters in a lot of books, right? But I mean, you read fantasy fiction for escapism, to vicariously experience things that you otherwise would not, like taking the ring to the mountain of fire, right? Like struggling and striving and climbing and fighting off all of these monsters and stuff, and managing to get to Mount Doom. Like, that's not an experience that anybody actually ever wants to have, but it's an experience that we are interested in vicariously in imagining what that would be like. Right?
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
So,
well, remember, Tolkien was in the Somme in World War One. I think that he is writing from experience in a way, but he's sparing us, like, how awful it actually was, right? By putting it in a fantasy context. But even then, like, by the end of Lord of the Rings, you're like, holy shit, these guys are never going to be the same. And so,
and you look at too, putting it in the fantasy context, it makes it. I mean, like, people like movies like Saving Private Ryan and The Pianist, and hyper realistic depictions of those kinds of situations. What was it? 1918, I think it was an amazing movie, and you watch that for the visceral feeling of, like, it's but it's not something that you would ever want to go through.
Yeah. No, for sure. Yeah, that's what. Well, I think there is an important point to these two stories. Part of it is that it's kind of like wisdom in a book,
Yes.
because he's writing about his experiences. So, but anyway, I feel like we're getting off track. Let's listen to more
All
of
right.
this.
For other people, it also becomes a source of comfort. And in real life, like none of us really know what's gonna happen, but in the romance novels, we get to read about people for whom most of the time, everything's gonna turn out okay. Helen Wong, author of The Kiss Quotient, even shares in an interview for Elle that happy endings are a key part of the appeal. Wong shares, "When I read a book and I know it's going to have a happy ending, I brace myself and guard my heart and don't want to get hurt. In romance, I have that trust that the author is going to take me on a ride, but it's going to be okay, which makes the experience more intense. You give up that control." Alex Axe also points out how weirdly great it is to read a story in which the characters' problems are, on the whole, pretty ordinary. Axe writes, "At a time when a lot of us are overwhelmed by outer problems that we can't really fix, retreating to a world where the main worry is if person A and person B are going to figure out their issues in time to have a fulfilling relationship, while probably not worrying about their president starting a nuclear war, feels pretty dang good." Beyond
No, it's
Couldn't
true.
they couldn't help themselves. They could
No,
not
but
help themselves.
it's true. Like most, I mean, like Harlequin romances have a very specific formula, and they actually like demand the formula by page number, basically by page this, they have to meet, by page that they have to like have a romantic, sexual or sexualized
Yeah,
encounter, right? By page X they have to have the big misunderstanding, right? And be angry with each other, and then by page Y you oh, it's like it was just a big misunderstanding, and then they get together, right? And so it's a very, very specific formula, and it's there to create tension in the middle, around specifically around the big misunderstanding. And so it is a very mundane formula, because all couples, whether they're newly dating or not, end up having a big misunderstanding at some point,
Mhm.
right? So
yeah.
And not always, and that is something that doesn't necessarily end, not
yeah,
just
yeah, but
one.
it's like, I thought he was cheating, but he was really out buying me a birthday present, right? So,
Yeah, but you have to understand, this woman doesn't want to actually, like, she has a life, but she doesn't want to show up for it. Like, she just
well,
doesn't, she doesn't want to have to do anything in her life. She's like the ultimate, like, I don't exist at all. I'm just a skin some man should
Yeah.
crawl into and animate. Okay.
All right, I got a super chat super chow from Great Indoors.
Ooh,
I'm gonna
cool.
read. So Great Indoors gives us $5. Thank you, Great Indoors, and says, in one of Better Bachelor's latest videos, I've seen young, attractive women in LA and New York City trying to get a date, and they are on TikTok complaining about the lack of men. We're talking about speed dating events that are only being visited by women. In what way does Manifestelle critiquing romance novels has anything to do with the situation right now in the real world? It's like watching bubbles within a bubble trying to deflate bubbles. Well, she
It's
doesn't
cope.
want to face the reality. Yeah, it's cope. She's I think a lot of women are lonely, and they haven't figured out that they could fix it, because they don't want to change. And they're
Well, they don't
lazy.
want to do emotional labor.
Right. They don't want to change, and they're lazy.
yeah, well,
That's it.
and I think it is getting to the point where even if they do show themselves as willing to do the emotional labor and provide value, and not value in the sense of what she values, but value in the sense of what a man would value in a woman, right?
Mhm.
Even if they get to that point, men are getting so fed up, right, with just the culture overall, that they might not be able to find one who's even willing to take a chance on anything serious with them.
Yep.
Well, I mean, you're basically entering a contract in which the other party can break it and take half your stuff at any point, and then also level false accusations, which are extremely difficult to fight. I mean, it's a real losing proposition for men. And in addition, you get to have a relationship with a person who the term emotional labor has to be one of the most toxic terms.
Yeah.
Because basically what they're saying is my side of a relationship is worth more than a man's side of the like my caring about his feelings is worth more than him caring about my feelings.
Yeah.
And it's
harder work for me to care about him.
The idea of
fairness him to care about me.
The idea of fairness destroys relationships. And this is what he's selling.
Reciprocity is bad.
But like I think me and Brian determined, Manifestelle is just giving women excuses to continue to live in misery by saying that the grapes are sour. Like it's not worth it to actually pursue a relationship with a man, even though you are basically ossifying in your own misery. You're marinating in your own misery to the point where it's turning into a crust that you'll never escape. But that's better.
And your eggs aren't getting any less stale, by the way, ladies.
That's better than making a change, because change requires courage and it requires independent thought. It's much easier to just continue to live in misery and pretend like the goods are sour, which incidentally I think it's not the same as MGTOW, because they're dealing with a legal system that is one-sided, that is essentially man at fault divorce. They're dealing with that. These women just don't want to live. They want a man to do everything for them. I'm not kidding when I say that Manifestelle is part, and the female dating strategy, they all just want to become a skin that a man crawls into and animates for them.
And they would call that oppression too. All right.
Probably.
Let's because it's controlling, you see. All right, let's keep going.
On escapism and comfort, though, romance novels also help readers navigate being a woman in the world by validating our feelings and emotions. Jessica Riga of ABC News specifically talks about the refreshing lack of shame present in the community of romance readers and how the genre is helping women reclaim things that we find joyful or pleasurable. As bookseller Amy McKinnon puts it, genre fiction has for a very long time been a male thing. So fantasy, sci-fi, crime novels. With the rise of romance, you have predominantly female writers reading predominantly female authors. I just think it's great to see women reclaiming some of genre fiction. Because quite often, romance novels are silly to the extent that they hate each other and fall in love.
Okay.
Well, you're just going to say more about this. Hold on.
More than nothing wrong with having things that are purely for female joy, whether that's the or the really cheesy romance of it.
Okay. All fiction put together, right? The entire fiction industry. Over 80% of the editors, the people who choose what gets published and what doesn't, are women. Right? So don't give me this bullshit about how genre fiction is male dominated. Women broke in largely through romance, right? But female editors now dominate. And that's for everything, including children's fiction. So, and crime and mystery and, action and horror and all of that. All of it.
Mm-hmm.
Right? So I'm sorry, but you don't get to say that anymore. You don't get to say, oh, the industry is patriarchal, right? When it's dominated by female authors, and that includes in a lot of non-romance genre fiction these days too, right? Like men are clinging by the atoms on the tips of their fingernails to a place in, the sci-fi and fantasy fiction market.
Clinging is optimistic, I'm afraid. I think pretty much gone. I mean, the only men left are ones who can claim to be gay or non-white, or part of a maybe Muslim. Did you want to disdain?
You still got your Dan Browns and your
Brandon Sandersons, and
Yeah.
Stephen King's.
Brandon
Yeah,
Sanderson.
the big names.
Yeah,
But
yeah.
there's not, like, when they die, that's going to be, like, literally, guys, when Stephen King dies, that's going to be the end of fiction. When Brandon Sanderson dies, there isn't, because there's nobody replacing them. Nobody.
Yeah.
And it's going to be the end of women's fiction too. Because get this, the reason why these books that women are writing sells is because they've co-opted tropes from men who did all of the heavy lifting, and some women too, let's be fair, who did all of the heavy lifting in the early 20th century, basically the 20th century, right? That those people wrote the actual worlds that these women are now placing their stories in. They wrote the actual story concepts, the actual characters that these women are appropriating. All we see now in fiction is basically fan fiction of other people's stuff, nothing new. And when there are no longer the big male names, the entire industry is going to collapse, because nobody will want to read something so boring.
Well,
And
it'll just be the same shit over and over.
it'll be the same shit over and over. There'll be nothing new to co-opt. And I'm not saying that in the past there weren't creative female authors. There were. But that's not what's happening now. They existed in a male construct around merit. Now the entire industry is based around checking off a Pokemon box, not
Well,
about merit.
And when you look at it too, with with the male readership, I mean, like, there are a lot of men out there who would rather read nonfiction accounts of World War II and stuff like that, right? Or Van Nostrand's Scientific Encyclopedia, or like stuff like that. But you still have, some genres of fiction, mostly on the screen, right, that have strong male audiences, like mostly male audiences in some cases, right? But that's getting watered down too. It's getting that what appeals to the male is getting diluted, right, by female sensibilities. By it really is kind of like that article that made me discover the Spearhead online magazine, right, which was my first experience of men's rights activism. The very first article was a complaint that science fiction now always needs a romantic subplot to gain the female audience, right? And so it's like you can't just find hard science fiction anymore. There's always some kind of something to appeal to the female readership or the female audience. And okay, well, they want to maximize their profits, right? They want to maximize their sales, and women will drag their boyfriends and husbands to the theater to watch things, and women will buy books more often than men will. But I mean, the days of David Gemmell are like they're gone. Like the days of that kind of fantasy fiction where the romantic subplot, if one exists, is like minuscule. It's subtle. It's barely hinted at.
Can I say a few things?
Yes.
I want to. Okay, thank you. So I have a few things floating around in my head that I want to bring up. Okay, so first of all, men are reading fewer books than women by far. There is almost nothing for them to read. So in terms of like escaping into literature, it is a shrinking. And I'm not saying that men aren't writing books, but that's not the important question, because men can write books for women, and they often do. But that men are not finding any books that are fiction, nonfiction, sure, historical, maybe philosophical stuff, they'll read that. But fictional books written for men are like a vanishing prospect. Okay, so that's just not happening, and it's because it's not being written. These things are not being written with men in mind. There's no interest for whatever reason. I saw there's more and more YouTubers that write or that make videos about writing have pointed this out. What it's like, why is it that we don't have fiction for men and boys anymore? Right? These stories are just non-existent. And there's lots of claims about it, but the fact is that men are not reading books as much as women. The other thing I was thinking about is Manifestelle is talking about reading as escapism, which I get, right? So, but here's the thing that I think is funny about this. A couple things. One, it's funny because when men want to escape, women come in there and they tell them that they're not allowed to do that and that they should get a real job or do something productive. So men escape by what? Playing video games. Why do men play video games? Because they want to be agents in the story. They want to be a part of it. That's why men generally are more interested in playing video games. The truth is that video games as a form of storytelling and entertainment is the biggest right now. Not barred, flat out, there's no competition. Hollywood is dead. Books are not for men anymore because women are writing them for other women, and men who write books are writing them for women as well. Music is garbage. So all that's left is video games, and that is being attacked because, and I think this is the real reason, because men enjoy them. And one of the ways that it gets attacked is that men get shamed for playing them because they're not allowed to escape. Yet women like Manifestelle and lots of other women will probably agree with this, is that they'll argue that reading romance novels is actually a higher form of escapism. It's more, it's more prestigious, or it's more elite for whatever reason. And they'll that's what they'll argue, is that and that women need to escape because the real world is so scary and oppressive. So that's another thing, is that it's funny that she thinks that this form of escapism is good while men's forms of escapism are always being attacked. And then the last thing I want to say about this, which I think is really interesting as well, there's been a lot of talk about the dangers of pornography and how it can affect people who consume it. Usually these criticisms are directed at men as well. Now, I think that there might be some meat on those studies, and I do think that there is something that to be said about how porn can affect the minds of men, especially young men who are consuming a lot of it. But having said that, I also want to say that could the same thing apply to women who read romance novels? Because that's what gets them wet. That's the facts. Yeah. So when she says that romance is like this massive industry, I'm like, well, yeah, but porn is also big. So are these the same? Can we compare them? I think we can. And I think it's funny because what it sounds like to me is that Manifestelle is making the case for women being addicted to porn, but she's just calling it romance novels and calling it like some kind of liberation, from the real world and from men. And it's an escapism that is completely healthy and permissible. Whereas, again, men are shamed for porn usage. Men are shamed for playing video games, but it's totally okay when women do it. And I wonder, because I know that there are studies that have been done on the effects of pornography. Why aren't there studies being done on the effects of romance novels on women? Because I guarantee you that it does affect what women expect in men. Yes. So there you go. That's what I wanted to say.
There is studies that I've looked at, and it creates unrealistic expectations. And in fact, the more that women seem to replace actual men with these romance novel men, the more they start believing things like emotional labor, which is essentially just your part of a relationship, right? Like the fact that you exist with another human being with their own emotions, their own intentions, and you have to sort of extend yourself to understand it, to understand them, to maintain the relationship. That becomes an imposition solely on women somehow. And I think it's in part because of the female form of porn, what they call pornification of the brain, which actually I think they found that romance novels are worse. Because they give you they don't just give you false ideas about how sex works. They give you false ideas about how relationships work.
Yeah.
And they inculcate women with ideas like, oh, he should be able to read my mind, and if he doesn't love me. How many times have we seen that behavior destroy relationships? Perfectly fine relationships with a man who isn't psychic. Yeah. And But yeah, that's I have seen the studies, and they do show that romance novels cause problems. But of course, if they cause problems in women, she would argue that that's just, any problem that a woman has is a man's responsibility to fix.
Well,
Mm-hmm.
All right,
Yeah,
so
I was just okay. Let's play. Let me look
how
at
many
the
more
time
time codes are there here?
I have let me see what I have one more written down, but there's definitely some more stuff we could get into. So let me jump ahead to the next thing. It's like right here. Okay.
Real life relationships are for women. And that makes so much sense, especially when you think about how the emotional labor that's required to sustain relationships disproportionately falls on women.
It
An
doesn't.
article for Elle
No, but Allison, of course it
Okay.
does, because as
Okay.
you know, it's emotional labor.
Emotional
Okay.
labor.
If you're talking about certain expectations for maintaining ties with family and things like that, yes, women are generally the ones who do the Christmas shopping for the family. Women are generally the ones who fill out the Christmas cards and organize the family dinners and all of those things, right? Like they're generally the ones who do that kind of stuff, right? And are expected to do that kind of stuff. I don't do those things. See, that's you can choose not to do that. You can choose not to bother with Christmas cards, right?
They get thrown out anyway.
Well, yeah, and it's like, who the fuck cares, right? Like, why would I spend the money and go to all the trouble and I'm going to write a little personalized note in every one, right? For people that live halfway across the country or all the way across the country. I can talk with them on the phone, right? I can keep up with them via email, right? Like this is just a useless freaking. It's like it's a platitude, right? It's like when we attended a Thanksgiving dinner with my husband's family, right? And for his grandmother, and and his aunt stands up and she's like, "It's just so wonderful. I can feel the love in the room and it's so great for the whole family to be together." And she's just gushing, right? And I'm just sitting there, my kids and I look at each other and I'm just like, yeah, she's not kidding anybody. They all hate each other.
Yeah, there's a
right? They all do.
When I listen to that emotional labor crap, how much women are the ones who write the Christmas cards and shop for the presents, but they're also the ones who bring the unbelievable levels of toxic emotional tension.
Yeah.
And the drama and the accusations and the false accusations that you did this to me when I was a girl and I'll never forgive you.
Oh,
Come on. And the men are the ones who have to deal with that crap, right? And all of the autistic women as well.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. I'm like looking at the transcript. Are we going to go through the whole now romance novels are used to confine women to blah blah blah? Is that what we're going into now?
We're I think we're heading there. Yes, I think so. So
okay.
All right, here we go.
Catherine Laidlaw sheds light on this common experience among women. One of the women who uses the alias Christine in the article.
Oh yeah, I forgot to read the super chow I just got. Winter gives us $10 and says, "Honey for the Badgers, great show today." Thank you, Winter. Okay, I just want to make sure I didn't forget.
Shared how her relationship dynamics with her boyfriend was draining her. 10 months in, Christine started to notice some red flags in how he approached the necessary tasks that come with keeping a relationship on track. For one, he couldn't plan ahead. "I rely on you to be my calendar," he'd tell her when she would comment on his lack of initiative. And when it came to making dinners together, all the details were on her. From coming up with meals they both liked, to picking up groceries, to remembering to take the chicken out of the freezer in the morning. Christine's experience, which isn't uncommon among women, falls under a form of feelings management called emotional labor. Coined in
That is trivial.
How how is being the one who gets to decide what you're going to eat
Yeah, right. I was
a
thinking
burden?
that.
Like, how is that a burden? I mean, I guess it's like the emotional burden of having to decide, like,
Yeah,
and
that's
not just be told.
because they tried to get they were trying to initially, this is how it, how it always gropes to new victimhood. It's like a
Yeah.
tree root groping for water.
It's
Um,
like the monkey, the
yeah,
swinging
they're
monkey.
yeah, always new branch. Well, they started this victimhood with women have a second shift, and then we did the whole general social survey, and we found that actually men work, I think, 4 to 7 hours more a week
Yeah.
between everything. And in fact, men picked up, I think, an additional 15 hours in order for women to go back to work. By the way, guys, did you know that? Extra
Yeah.
15 hours of work in a week. But
To
regardless,
subsidize your wife
they looked at that and
playing
they're like,
outside the house.
oh, looks like we can't find victimhood there. So let's go find it in this vague term called emotional labor, which now has evolved into having to make decisions. So it's not just having to write letters at Christmas time. It's now telling your partner what he needs to do. So that is emotional labor. Even though he's the one who has to do it, if you have to tell your partner what he needs to do, that is emotional labor and you are being abused. It usually is considered coercive control, but because it happens to a woman, it's actually emotional labor that she is obligated to do for the man. Right? So she has to make the decisions about what they're going to eat. That's her being oppressed by the man, because he should make the decision what they're going to eat and know exactly what she wants. Right?
Yeah, well, and
Reading.
if he decides wrong, he's going to hear about it.
Yeah. So essentially, their entire construct of emotional labor is my man isn't psychic and doesn't do what I want before I tell him. Like that's.
Yeah.
And
no,
this
and
is
then
the
and
new
then
thing
and
they're
then
humping.
if he even if he did guess right what she wanted to have for dinner, maybe she's just not happy that he would make assumptions like that. Like, why wouldn't he ask me?
Yeah. So, and also that description of emotional labor is, any guy watching this, I know there's not a lot of you, but there's a few of you, you realize that basically applies to anything a woman can contribute to the relationship. Because she's not describing any additional stuff. She's not saying I'm doing this for the cooking. I'm also paying the bills. I'm also keeping the car fixed. I'm also mowing the lawn. I'm also fixing the gutters. I basically do everything. And he just sits there like a spoiled girly on the couch, taking my bag and having his own. She's not saying that. She's just saying, well, I have this chore of taking care of the food. So the fact that they can isolate any chore, and they can't say overall I'm doing more anymore, they just isolate a single chore and saying I have to do this, means that if they end up having to do anything in the relationship, you are exploiting them.
Yeah, well, and for feminists who are all about the money, right? Money doesn't seem to factor into this at all. I mean, like when I look at my relationship with my husband, right, it's very, very, very delineated, right? I do manage all the bills and manage all the food and do all the shopping and do a lot of the exterior maintenance of the house and take the garbage out and do a lot of stuff like that, right? I do those things, and he generally doesn't have to do any kind of domestic work around the house. I do keep the car filled up. I take it into the shop for repairs, all of those things, right? He doesn't generally have to lift a finger around the house unless there's something too heavy for me to lift or, I need an extra set of hands. That's fine. He'll pick up after himself and stuff like that and, put his dishes in the kitchen, right? And things like that. But it's like, that's fine because he brings in 6 figures, right? And if he's bringing in 6 figures, and I know how hard he works because he talks to me about it, right? And he asks for my advice on how to manage the office politics and still be able to get some work done, right? I know how hard he works and how stressful it is. And so it's like, to me, that seems like a fair exchange, because I mean, feminists would argue that, well, if you had to hire somebody, a professional, to come in and do everything that you do, right? Or a team of professionals, because you'd need a maid and you'd need a cook and you'd need a housekeeper and you'd need and you need a groundskeeper and you'd need, a handyman, and oh, that would cost way more than $120,000 a year, right? Yeah, or you could just do it yourself. I mean, none of this stuff is stuff that you have to hire a professional to do, or not a lot of it. Installing the new sewer main, digging up the yard and installing the new sewer main, that required professionals, right? But snake in my laundry drain, I can do that. Why would I pay somebody to come and do it?
I heard that one guy actually countered with his wife on that. She wrote up everything that he would have had to pay in order to replicate her labor, and then he wrote up everything she would have to pay to get the lawn mowed, to get the gutters
because
fixed.
she has to pay half of that, because this is all half of her stuff, right? So she has to pay for all of her own clothes and half the kids' clothes, and she has to pay for her car and her car's insurance, right? She has to, and gassing it up and all of these things, and she has to pay for half the food, and she has to pay for half of the household supplies, half of the furniture, half of everything, half the rent, half the mortgage, half the homeowner's insurance, half of everything, right? And once you drill down into what she would owe, if she was paying 50% of everything that was mutually shared and 100% of her own expenses, her makeup and her toiletries and all of that shit, right? Meanwhile, he's washing with Old Spice 2-in-1 body wash and shampoo, right? He's got his one toiletry.
Yeah. When they did that, but then you also add in all the work he does, lawn maintenance, car maintenance, computer maintenance. So they do that. If he does any kind of
half of that,
renovations and carpentry work. Okay. And the guy added all of that and came up with a figure that she owed him $150,000 a year.
Yep.
And never had that argument again. And honestly, this is what women need to realize. You are being played.
Yep.
You are being poisoned with this idea of unfairness when you are actually receiving an absolutely equal relationship, or even the man is doing 4 to 7 more hours a week in order, and compared to his father or his grandfather, he's doing another 15 hours so that you can just go to work at a part-time job.
Yep.
Like, that's an unbelievably stupid exchange.
Yeah,
but we did it
because this is why a lot of women back in, like when I was a kid, a lot of women went to work, right? And you had these playgrounds all over the neighborhood, these suburbs just sitting empty all day because none of the women were home. All their kids were in daycare. But my mom and one of our neighbors, right? Well, one of our neighbors, she took in mending. Right? She just put an ad in the paper, right, saying, bring your clothes to me to mend, and I'll mend them for you for this much money. My mom babysat. She participated in an underground economy. She gardened. She did all kinds of stuff to both save money and I don't think we really bought vegetables at the grocery store ever, if they were able to be grown here. And so it's like you have a situation where it's like you can put in the work, and the money that you save is money in your pocket, and the money that you earn, right? The money that you earn being able to be in your own home, looking after things, and also being a block parent, because there were kids who were out running around and stuff, and they sometimes get in trouble, they get lost or whatever, and and they look at that sign and they're like, oh, I can go knock on that door.
Yeah.
So it's like, so she carpooled for money. She fed the neighbor kids lunches when you weren't allowed to eat your lunch at elementary school, and unless the weather was so bad it was hazardous for you to be made to walk home. And so you had to go home for lunch, and a lot of these mothers were working. So my mom was just like, well, here, for like $5 a week, I'll feed your kid every day. And so there you go. And she contributed financially, and she put in a lot of work, but she certainly didn't put in as much physical labor as my dad. My dad worked extremely long hours. He was at work by 7 every morning. He was often not home until 7 at night. He was a heavy duty mechanic. And like you should have seen, like, it was shocking to me, because mom says, what's taking your dad so long to wash up? Dinner's getting cold. Go find him. And he's in the bathroom trying to pick a shard of metal out of his pupil that got kicked up by a fan in the engine of one of the trucks he was working on. And he finished his shift and came home and tried to pick it out with tweezers.
Oh, good Lord.
All right, let's play some more.
Sociologist Arlie Hochschild, emotional labor was used to describe jobs that require you to put your feelings aside to get the job done, as in the case of flight attendants, nurses, and teachers. But today, emotional labor has found...
Yeah, no, my dad never had to do emotional
Karen's
labor.
Story.
Yeah, my dad missed my
teachers.
grade 9 graduation because he had to drive up to Swan Hills in a rainstorm. This is like an hour and a half away or something like that, right? In a rainstorm, and fix a truck. And he missed his daughter's grade 9 graduation ceremony, or farewell ceremony, or whatever you want to call it, right? And I'm sorry, but I understood. It was kind of a bummer, but I understood that was his job. He had to set aside his feelings and do what needed to be done. Like, what the fuck? Right? And he always taught me how to do that. That's why whenever any of the guys in the kitchen cut themselves real bad, guess who they called?
But did you see who this woman had the audacity of saying? Teachers, flight attendants, and nurses. Well, I mean, admittedly,
Nurses.
you do have to put nurses, but also doctors and orderlies.
Yeah.
And pilots.
And police officers.
And police officers and EMT. And definitely all of the jobs where men have to deal with all kinds of inclement weather, bugs, difficult
climbing
labor.
up one of those towers that has the blinking lights on top to change the light bulb.
Have you seen the videos of those? Oh my God.
Jesus
but that's not
Christ.
emotional labor.
Yeah, no,
It's
he didn't have to do anything to get over his emotions to do that.
This is delicate hiney thinking.
Oh, Jesus Christ.
You know what delicate hiney is? It's the whole argument against girls being subject to corporal punishment in the past in schools.
Oh,
it's
yeah,
because we
yeah.
have delicate
Delicate
heinies.
heinies.
Yeah, this is emotional labor, and men's work isn't, because you ladies have delicate heinies.
Oh,
okay,
God.
That's
yeah. Well,
that's a lot of
Manifestelle
arguments.
I wish my mom had embraced the delicate hiney philosophy, because one of us was getting it at least once a week, and she used a wooden spoon because you're the one being bad. Why should I have to hurt my hand?
Yikes. Okay, let's
I got a super chat from Gary Thomas. He gave us $5 and says, whenever Karen tells a story about her family, I always think to myself, the Viking spirit runs strong in these people.
Yeah,
my mom, it's the Ukrainian spirit.
Yeah.
Oh, and Russian.
Yeah.
And Acadian.
That's pretty close to Viking, though. You probably do have a lot of Viking, even from the Russian and Ukrainian.
Yeah, we got some steppe people, and then we also got some native Canadians, some First Nations in our Acadian my Acadian grandfather. So
I just think about, my father just did geophysics. So
well,
Okay, shall we?
ahead.
that's certainly nothing to be proud of.
All right,
Geophysics.
let's
That's pretty rough. That's actually like, it's not physically rough.
Well, no,
but
he actually was one of, I think, 6 people in the world that could do what he did.
yeah,
Um,
yeah.
He actually has a
it's
mathematical
extremely
formula named after him.
intellectually challenging.
Yep.
So
Up you go. Up you go. He has
All right.
a mathematical formula named after him. So I think that's
Ooh.
sort of cool. And it's called the Teeman transform. Anyway, let's keep.
all right, let's play more.
Found space in our personal lives being used to describe the quiet mental work required to keep a relationship or household humming. But like, why does that responsibility fall mostly only on women? Writer Leandra
Mostly
Winterwood.
only. Mostly only.
Mostly only. Yes.
yeah, no, because the women are up on the ladder cleaning the gutters, right? Like when we went to my mother-in-law's place to help her with her yard, because her knee was all messed up and the grass needed cutting and all kinds of things needed doing, and all of the dangerous stuff and the difficult stuff was done by the men.
Yeah, of course.
Yeah. So
Yeah, but they don't count that. Like
No.
that anything outside the home is not of the home, apparently.
Well,
So
except for the gutters and your yard is part of your home. Unless you're going to rent it out to someone else.
No, but they don't think, like, the women who think, the delicate hiney women don't think that anything outside the home is
Outside
of
the
home.
house, yeah.
Outside the house, yes.
Including the outside of the house.
Yeah, including
Like
the outside of the house.
the siding and the shingles and the
Or even
gutters
inside the house, but requiring anything that is a tool to
yeah.
do. Like
If you can't call it a utensil, then they don't want anything to do with it.
yeah, or they don't even recognize it exists.
Yeah. Even
damn
my
it.
daughter has a freaking cordless screwdriver. Right? And she bought it for her and her brother to use. They live they share half a duplex together, and she'll use that thing. She's got no problem. She knows how to. She was my assistant when I was renovating this house before we moved in. She rewired all the switches and the outlets, and she did a bunch of painting and a bunch of using the saws and measuring and cutting and all of that stuff, right? So she learned a lot about tools.
Okay, so let's the interest of eventually getting through this, let's
Yeah.
Do you want me to jump ahead to
well, I'm curious about the
So-
whole thesis about how this is now patriarchal control, because
Why women work harder in a relationship than men.
do you want me to play this bit or go into the next bit, which is toxic tropes in romance?
no, actually, let's do this. Let's do it.
Yeah, I want to
Let's
hear
do it.
this.
I want
Yeah.
this. No,
Wanna hear
play
this?
from here. Yes.
Okay, playing it from here. All right, here we go.
Offers one possible answer, which is that many relationships are between two people who are at different emotional maturities, with men commonly being more emotionally immature. But why? Like, why are they more commonly more emotionally immature? Well,
Well, these days because they're raised by single moms, but you wouldn't want to have that conversation.
No, I
One
don't
of the
think
most-
that. I don't think that.
Well,
that's what
I know
she's
that
getting at.
I know that boys tend to mature a little bit later than girls do.
Yeah, they do.
But I
but
think, yeah, go ahead.
but they reach a higher. Okay, she's mistaking vomiting your emotions all over everyone
Yes.
around you as emotional she's mistaking it for emotional mastery. See, I can do what a toddler can do. So I am emotionally mature, and this man sucks it up, doesn't act out, right? And just finally you'll push him far enough that maybe he'll raise his voice and call you a cunt, right? But
Not on Twitter, it gets you banned.
he's generally really
I
Twitter?
got reported for just saying your strategy is to demand stuff from men, but be a cunt about it. For just using that, for just saying that.
okay.
And I'm still appealing it, so we'll see. But no, continue with your.
Okay, but yeah, no. So it's like most men suck it up and get whatever task they have to do done. They are not as interested in administrative tasks, right? I mean, like, this is why when women go out in the workforce, they're mostly doing what they would be doing at home. Janet Bloomfield, she revealed this perfectly. They're administrative assistants, so they keep a man's calendar, or keep a boss's calendar. They run his or her errands for them. They cook. They serve food, right?
Clean,
they clean.
They teach children. Yeah.
They are the hands-on healthcare professional, right? Who kisses your boobie, your
boo-boo.
your boo-boo,
Or your boobie,
boobie, but your boo-boo, when you're in the hospital, holds your hand, makes you feel comfortable, makes you feel reassured while you wait for the doctor, sometimes for over an hour, right? So, like, they're doing those tasks. Those are all tasks that they would be doing at home if they were housewives. They manage bills, right? They juggle money, right? They do bookkeeping, right? They're accountants, right? These are the things that they do when they go out and work primarily, right? And those are the things they'd be doing at home. They just have to do all of them. They'd have to be a Jill of all of those things, as opposed to a Jack of all of those things.
Mm-hmm. All right, Alison, you're talking, but I can't hear you. You're muted.
Oh, sorry.
Okay, there you go.
I gotta.
Oh, and she dropped. All right.
No, she said she had to go.
No, she did not say that she had to
Yes,
go.
she said I gotta, and then she put a thumb down.
Oh, well, she's gone.
Mm.
Okay, I'm gonna wait until she comes back and see if she needs me to like re-enter her on the thing. But in the meantime, we'll listen.
Have you tried logging off and then back on again?
Obvious reasons is the difference in socialization between young girls and young boys. And that carries into how young adults are socialized and how grown adults are socialized. Like, we're all socializing each other. And there is a difference. According to psychologists and sexual...
All right.
You come back.
You're back. Yeah, you're back. Okay.
Mike.
Oh.
There's my Shure microphone is jury rigged because the USB-C broke off. So I have to use this sort of elaborate system that's, if it gets bumped, like, it goes to crap. So unfortunately, I think it's because the cat keeps rubbing up against it. Maybe. But anyway, yeah.
All right, so
I probably should just maybe take some stuff and it'll be fine.
Yeah. So just what you missed briefly. Manifestelle is claiming that all men are emotionally immature because they're socialized to be emotionally immature, and she's going to get into this article by Sarah Fielding entitled "Understanding Gender Roles and Their Effect on Our Relationships." So we're going to get into some more socialization and all of that. Okay, here we go.
Wellness therapist Satadeepa Som, gender roles can have a significant impact on our relationships by creating power imbalances and limiting our ability to express ourselves authentically. When we internalize traditional gender roles, we may feel pressure to conform to certain expectations of how men and women should behave in relationships. This can lead to frustration, resentment, and lack of intimacy. Boys
This
and men
from the
in
woman
general,
who demands that she get his bag while keeping her own bag. So yeah, she shouldn't have to have any of the traditional roles expected of women, and yet men still need to provide the traditional benefits that women get from a relationship.
Yeah.
And anybody wondering why men are just, I don't know what it's at now. I know that a couple of years ago, the amount of men who are even willing to look for a relationship went down 10% in like 2 years. I don't know what it is now. Has anybody looked at it? Are there any men left who really want this deal? Like,
no.
And at the end of the day, you're not going to be loved.
I mean, more women are reading romance novels. I mean, consuming porn.
Yeah.
these days. So they're obviously like lonely, but they're not willing to like actually look in the fucking mirror and do something about it. Instead, they're just
Be
online
realistic,
complaining
yeah.
about men.
Yep.
So, but anyway,
Are not really expected to do the work that's required to maintain healthy romantic relationships. They're not given the tools to be vulnerable or to express themselves emotionally. And-
Lady, you expect men to do everything in a courtship. You even
Wait, what?
expect your male friends to court you. Like, do you remember
why aren't the men's moms teaching them how? I mean, like the dad's not around. You don't like them, so obviously mom's the one that's not showing these boys how they're supposed to act. Why is
Well,
that happening?
Well,
What
okay,
caused this
but
problem?
yeah, no, like ask any red-pilled man, what's the first thing that happens when you expose your vulnerability to the average modern woman?
But I don't think.
She
But
says,
the thing
she
is, I
says,
don't.
sorry, bye-bye.
Yeah, for sure. But I don't think that she's actually saying that men should be expressing themselves. I think that what she's saying is that men should be like stepping up service to women and that is how they, because she said, let me go back a little bit, just so we know. So when we internalize traditional gender roles, we may feel pressure to conform to certain expectations of how men and women should behave in relationships. This can lead to frustration, resentment,
and lack of intimacy. Boys and men in general are not really expected to do the work that's required
so
to
it's
maintain
not-
healthy.
So they're
she's
not
heard-
expected to do the work to maintain healthy romantic relationships. It's not about men expressing their emotions to women or vomiting their emotions. In fact, it is about men just doing the work to make women comfortable without, without any consideration, without expectation of reward, nothing. Just doing what you're supposed to do. And if men are not doing that and they're not reading women's minds, which is essentially what she would call emotional maturity, knowing what a woman wants and anticipating those needs, which romance novels does, right? Like
Yeah.
characters in romance novels can read, like the man can read the mind and heart of a woman and he gives it to her. And then that woman reads that and says, well, men should be doing this then. And then she looks around and that's not happening. So when Manifestelle talks about emotional maturity, she's not talking about that. She is simply talking about service. Men's service to women without women putting in any labor, including asking for what they want, because that's too much work. No, it's
Yeah.
true. And so it's like in The Notebook, what is it? It's not that simple. There was that meme where Ryan Gosling is like, what do you want? And she's like, it's not that simple. It's literally that. Like but instead the man, because a man says, what do you want? Well, you're just asking her to do all kinds of work to tell you what she wants. You shouldn't have to do that. You should know what she wants and you should be able to give it to her. That's what she's talking about.
It's like
not
that
about toxic
like what
masculinity.
He wants to be worn like a skin.
It's like that
Yes.
episode of Seinfeld. I think it was called The Bench or something like that, right? And Jerry and Elaine were like trying to like have a sexual relationship again, but it was supposed to be casual. And
Oh yeah. I remember that one.
Yeah, and it was her birthday coming up, and Jerry didn't have any idea what to get her, and so like neither did George, and so they decided on cash, and it's like, well, how much are you going to give her? And I was going to give her $114 or something like that, and George was like, well, you're sleeping with her, I'm not, so I'm going to give her half that, right? And then Kramer comes in with this wooden bench. And she's like, oh my God, it's so wonderful. She's like looking at the cash going, what the fuck is wrong with you, man? Right? She's like, oh my God, how did you know? And Kramer's just like, oh, when we were walking by the shop window, you mentioned how much you liked it. And so I made a note of it. And, and she's like, that was 2 months ago. And he's like, yeah, mind like a steel trap. Right? And I'm just like, that is like, how are men supposed to even, like, Kramer was able to do that because Kramer is insane.
Yeah. Well, obviously men have to be insane, but also Kramer still required emotional labor from her because she had to actually say that she liked the bench. You should have just intuited it by the movement of her eyes across its glossy surface or some shit. Like,
Yeah, she had to comment on it. Oh, that's.
I
such a
just want
cute
to point
bench.
something out about the logic that just occurred. Do you notice how in the quote they were talking about expectations placed on both men and women? And now she's just talking about how, and they were talking about how these traditional expectations lead to frustration and intimacy. Now we're just talking about how men don't have enough expectations placed on them.
Yeah.
Expectations of service placed on them. Did you notice that it went from expectations on both
for
men
sure.
and women, frustrating intimacy, to her taking that and ignoring 9/10 of the content of it and just say, actually, I think she ignored the entirety of it and simply said, it's men avoiding expectations. It's men not having expectations placed on them. That's the problem. Dr. So-and-so says expectations to gendered expectations are the problem. Manifestelle says no. The problem is there aren't enough of them.
Yeah, men aren't living up to them.
Yeah. Well, I mean,
Yeah.
okay, let's keep going. And this is a
All
gendered
right.
expectation.
Mm-hmm.
Romantic relationships. They're not given the tools to be vulnerable or to
See?
express themselves emotionally.
Tools
And
to be
not
vulnerable
But wait a
or
second,
express
wouldn't that be
themselves
emotional
emotionally.
labor? Wait, isn't that
No,
incompatible?
but
with the-
also to be because they're not emotional, they're not perceptive of other people's emotions. So it's
Oh.
not about, there's nothing sympathetic in this towards men. This is only
yeah,
talking
okay.
about how women are affected. There's
Okay.
no amount of sympathy towards men in this at all.
Okay,
They're
Yeah.
just
can I just
supposed to be used.
can I point something out? The woman whose emotions are the ones that determine the emotional landscape of any particular group, she's usually completely ignorant of everybody else's emotions. This is what I've noticed. Like, she doesn't even perceive, and if she does, she considers them to be illegitimate. So when you say that somebody has to feel emotions to be perceptive of other people's emotions, that's total bullshit. Because
Well, that's clear from a lot of the studies. You know, like that. I mean, think back to 2014 in St. Clair Shores, right, where Stefan Molyneux and Warren Farrell both noted that being compassionate with your kids is not how to teach them to be compassionate. Right? You teach them to be compassionate by being able to discipline your kids, make them set aside their own emotional wants and needs, right? Force them to put others first sometimes, wait their turn, and then also let them play freely, unsupervised with kids near their age, in order to learn how to hash out disagreements on their own and how to compromise within peer-to-peer relationships. So, I mean, like, being a gushing mother is not doing your kid any favors.
Yeah.
So anyway, my battery's almost dead here. Let me check it.
okay, how much more do we have of this? Is she just Manifestelle is deeply
Oh, I
like
got
she
20%
repeats
left,
herself
so it's
quite a
okay.
bit. She repeats herself quite a bit. How much?
Yeah,
how
I'm
much?
just well, I
Because
mean,
Brian's got to
there's
go soon.
I gotta go soon, yes. I'm
Okay.
gonna try to get to this bit where she tries to reclaim and redefine romance itself. Maybe that will be of some interest. Okay.
Enlightening. I also have to do
Yeah,
a thank
so
you.
do you want to do that now?
I could.
All right.
So Richard Bier puts in 500. Thank you, Richard.
Oh, wow.
To the
Thank you,
fundraiser.
Richard.
Yep. Well, this
Emotional damage.
and also he did put this through as a request. But I chose it because Karen is a romance writer and I'm trying to have kind of romance in the writing that I'm doing.
Well, this is definitely the what not to do video for sure. So,
well, certainly, like writing is close to my heart. Like the entire the
Process.
landscape of it. I hope the process, but also what's going on in the publishing industry. I honestly think it's dying because it just doesn't. it has no creativity anymore. It's just basically Xeroxes flying around, Xeroxes of Xeroxes of Xeroxes.
Mhm.
And the funny thing is that the more women take over the industry, the less women read. Women are stopped. They're no longer, are actually declining as readers too.
Well, you know, I
All
think
right.
so, the reason is because the best writers probably, like, personally have had, like, you know, some serious experiences like that. I think, well, at least the stuff that men want to read. I don't know. But anyway,
Yeah.
let's keep going.
Relationships or even the lack of a fulfilling relationship, romance novels are a sort of coping mechanism. They create this version of a world where love is abundant, emotional needs are met, and women are valued for their full complexity and are perceived and understood in all of their complexity. A world where women are cherished, prioritized, even if it's only for a little while. But
Okay,
as
wait.
safe and comforting the romance
Where
Yeah, but
women
you're
are
not complex.
prioritized.
Okay, but
Yeah.
you see, all women are not complex.
Well, not all women are complex, but the where women are prioritized. That's really the key here.
She demands to be prioritized in every aspect of her life and relationships. Like
Yeah.
literally, if you get in a relationship with this woman, all you'll ever do is serve her until she decides that she fell short of something.
Yeah.
And then you will be probably the evil one who was abusing her by falling short of her expectations. Like, do you remember that one statement? I had to do chores around making supper. That was a huge red flag. Like, if you
Yeah.
ever fail in this woman's expectations, and you will become the narcissist ex that she had to get away from, who just couldn't understand her needs.
Yep.
Ugh.
All right, I'm hitting play.
genre may seem, it's not perfect. Buried underneath all the good things that the book boyfriends do, how handsome they are, how caring they are,
can't fucking
how
believe it.
emotionally mature
Even
and perceptive
fictional
they
men.
are, buried underneath all of that are harmful notions that, if we're not careful enough, can influence how we view women and ourselves and relationships and love itself.
Can I get in here just for a second? Even fictional men created by women are not good enough.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, let's find out how.
Yeah,
Let's
of
find
course.
out how.
Yeah. Sure. Why not?
For one thing, the concept of romance has historically been weaponized to reinforce the superiority of men over women. From Samuel Richardson's Pamela or Virtue Rewarded to the more modern day love stories, there are still so many narratives in which the female character's worth is tied to her ability to attract and keep a man. Not
Mhm.
only this, but there are still stories that show women as this passive recipient waiting to be pursued and rescued by a male hero or a savior.
You
For
mean your
example,
content? Like literally fucking your content.
Yeah. And also, this is what makes women wet. So it's like, talk to women about it, and
Yeah.
don't blame patriarchal stereotypes. Get women to examine themselves and what makes them tick, right? Because and don't blame patriarchy, don't blame socialization, don't blame any of that stuff. Just actually have, like, every single woman on this planet needs to have a crash course in evolutionary psychology. They do.
Okay. Well, at least to acknowledge this, but my point here is just the hypocrisy right in front of us. She would say that a man should do everything in a relationship. Like I would honestly challenge Manifestelle to tell anyone what she thinks a woman should be expected to do in a relationship, because I'm pretty sure it's nothing. Well,
Be
in
a
that case,
receptacle of service.
yeah, she's a receptacle of service. Well, what do you think this is of the Bella Swan? She was a receptacle of being saved by this the most powerful male in her vicinity, right? You
Edward.
are
Yeah.
you're essentially framing the same idea. That woman who talked about having to decide what was for supper, and do some basic chores to ensure that supper was able to be made on time. Do you know what? She is Bella to Edward, but it's in the framework of making supper. She needs to be saved from having to determine what supper is, from having to do the chores of supper. She needs to be saved from taking action, right?
Yeah.
That's exactly what the situation is in Twilight, but it's just in a smaller scale. Everything that Manifestelle counsels women to do is to be receptacles of service, which are just being saved from things on smaller scales.
Yes.
And then she complains that women seek out romance. You know what this is? She just doesn't like the competition. Romance novels are honing in on Manifestelle's territory. Eyeballs and attention and clout. I mean,
Yeah.
Manifestelle knows how best women should be served. Don't read those nasty romance novels from her competition. They don't know how best to serve women, how's this best to save them. Anyway, I just wanted to point out the absolute hypocrisy right in front of us.
Oh yeah.
Yeah, I know women need to recognize that there's a hypergamous quality in them and take responsibility for it if they want to improve this situation.
Well,
But
men
instead,
also need to recognize their own hypergamy, which is not along financial or social status lines necessarily, but more about physical attractiveness,
but regardless,
and personality, right? The personality traits that would make someone a good mother to an infant.
Right.
okay,
Right.
but the point is that she's selling the very same things that romance novels are selling.
Yes.
And this seems to be more about attacking the competition and not have women continue to blame men for what women want from men.
Mm-hmm.
Like, could you imagine if men did this? Like Karen was talking about how, that hypergamy of men blaming women for making them want slender, youthful women.
Well, they can't even be concerned with a woman's body count without being shamed by the whole internet.
Yeah, but could you imagine? We
I
lived in a
know.
society where
No, we don't. We couldn't. I don't think it would be. I don't think we would.
Not
I think
only
that other men would hold those men accountable.
not only would men openly say that they prefer young, slender women, if a woman said, but I'm an older, not very slender woman that you don't desire, if a woman said that, she'd be censored. Those men would say, how dare you in any way impugn our character? Meanwhile, you're worthless because you're not the thing that we desire. I'm just saying, it'd be so fascinating to be in a bizarro world where everything was reversed. And then also saying it's your fault, that it's the matriarchy's fault that we desire young, youthful women.
Yeah, no, and the ridiculous thing is that women actually do set certain beauty standards, right? It used to be that women who were tanned, that was like a female driven fad. Women who were very slim, female driven fad, also by gay men in the fashion industry. And so I mean, and even sort of heavily made up women, heavily coiffed women, right? A lot of men just don't care about that kind of stuff. In fact, a lot of men are turned off by it. A ton of makeup and those long fucking Cardi B nails. Welcome to an invitation to an injury during sex, right? I don't even know how Cardi B hasn't stabbed her own child yet with those things. Right?
Yeah. I was gonna say, wasn't there in Japan, there was a female, I don't know if she was a queen or an empress or a princess, and her teeth were black, and so all the women would blacken their teeth because they thought it was fashionable.
It was, I think might have been Queen Elizabeth, because she had famously.
No, there was a Japanese.
Oh, yeah, you're right. Yeah,
yes,
that became a fashionable thing. I was just thinking, to take my bizarro world, it would be a world in which Humperdinck was the victim and Lolita was the aggressor. Oh, good
Yeah,
Lord.
right.
Imagine that.
All
But
right.
we do live in that world because, you get all the female jailers in the juvenile detention facilities saying he seduced me
Yeah.
to
Mhm.
a kid in jail, to
Yeah.
child in jail. Okay.
Yeah. Well, I mean, even if he did come on to you, right? It's your job as the person in a position in a position of authority with a duty of care to say no.
Yeah.
Mhm.
I actually, speaking of cops and people in positions of power in the justice system, you remember that cop that had sex with her entire precinct
Oh,
and
yeah,
then
right.
claimed that she was being groomed?
Mhm.
I said to somebody, if we can't hold her accountable for her choices, if she can't say no to these guys in this context with no actual physical pressure, because she didn't,
How can she even be a
how can
police
she be a
officer?
cop?
Yeah.
And they were saying, "Oh, you're a victim blamer." I'm like, "No, do you understand the concept of holding women to a standard of responsibility consistent with being a law officer of the law?"
Yeah.
No answer.
Yeah.
Ugh, because they can't,
Mhm.
just like Manifestelle, there's nothing there. Women have no responsibility to nothing. Okay, let's keep going.
I just want to say, as an aside, I'm glad that Robert Pattinson, who played Edward in these movies, has moved on to do some really great work. And what's her name hasn't really done shit. So that I just want to say, because he was in like The Lighthouse and he played Batman, and I think he's in something new that just came out recently. So Robert Pattinson just did Twilight to get his foot in the door, and now he's doing like the stuff he really wants to do, and I'm happy for him. And
Yeah.
what's her name is not so much. She's basically just
Well,
become an activist that works in Hollywood. But
she
anyway,
probably liked the material or something.
well, I think it was a job, and they were both pretty young, so
Yeah.
they wanted to break in, and I'm sure. But anyway, so Pepito gives us $10 and says, "One day Manifestelle will be played in training cycles for young cyborgs to learn about an old society dying of gender ideology. Thanks for the show." Well, thank you, sir.
Yeah.
Anyway, so let's well, let me just check my time codes. I think we're getting to the point. This is like the kind of the money shot of this video.
Okay, let's
Twilight.
do it.
The Twilight saga has culturally defined a lot of women's teenhoods. Like Bella Swan, she was that girl. Everyone wanted to be her. Everyone wanted to have an Edward. And there was also like Team Jacob, Team Edward, like it was a whole thing. And you know how much Twilight has informed my teenhood / early adulthood?
Yeah, that's
I
you.
went to Forks.
Yeah.
That's you.
It's funny because she thinks that's bad for the women who read those books, but I think it's bad for the men who had to basically compete with Edward and Jacob.
Why is she
Well,
on the cock chair?
No, but I think she's describing her disease here. And
Yeah.
and it's like, okay, so what came first, right? Fentanyl or your morphine addiction,
Mm-hmm.
right?
Mhm.
I mean, like, basically she had a personality and Twilight really appealed to it.
Mhm.
And yeah, and so but she's making the claim now that, like, oh, it's not a situation where someone is already a certain way, and then this book or movie or whatever maybe pushed them in that direction a little bit, right? Like, so a car is already pulling left, right? And you can let go of the steering wheel, and it'll put you into the ditch on the other side of the road, right? Or you can hold the steering wheel, right, and try and keep it straight, right, or pull over to the right. She's kind of acting like there was no original problem with the car pulling left, right?
Mm-hmm.
That she had an original problem, right, or an original way of being and seeing the world, right, and then came across this material that really appealed to that way of being and way of seeing the world. And it pushed her a little bit further, and maybe it has been such an influence on her, so reinforcing of what she already was, that now she has become this whatever the fuck she is now, right? Okay.
Well, honestly,
but okay, there was
but-
something there to work with. There was a reason that book and that movie appealed to you.
I just have a big question it's been sort of burning this entire time. I noticed that she's in a chair in the corner. Is she a cook queen?
I wouldn't speculate on that.
If we turned 180 degrees, would we be watching something a lot more interesting? Just
okay, that's petty. All right.
Is
so a little bit. Zaranx gives us $5 super chat and says Kristen Stewart isn't the driver of the Twilight films. I unfortunately read the Twilight series. Remember that series sparked 50 Shades. Why'd you read that? It wasn't for you, dude. No, of course not, because Kristen Stewart plays Bella Swan. Bella Swan is essentially just a template for women to embody.
She's
so
a
like
cardboard
male
cutout.
Yeah, male fiction is usually a story that is aspirational about someone else that men are looking at and sort of admiring from afar, from the third person perspective, right?
Aspirational figure.
Yeah, aspirational figures. Guys like Odysseus, and they like Hercules, and they like Luke Skywalker or whatever. They just like to see them do their thing. They like Frodo. But when women read fiction, they want to be the person in the story. So they write the character for those fictions aimed at women in such a way that any woman, they can feel like anybody. So they're kind of like
they can insert
they're a blank slate.
Blank slate into a blank a template.
Right. So the Twilight books are going to make Bella Swan like basically a nothing, just like an empty space.
She's
whereas the characters are all of the men that are attracted to her or around her. So look at there was a show. It was basically like a more mature version of Twilight called True Blood. It was on HBO. It was based on some books too, and it's the same kind of stuff. These steamy romance novels where Sookie, who was like this waitress in the South, that had was like a nobody that for whatever reason nobody noticed, but the vampires fell in love with her, and like the werewolves fell in love with all the supernatural, powerful, strong male characters wanted to be around her. They wanted to be with her. That was all just so that the women reading the books could inject themselves into that. 50 Shades of Grey is the same. It's basically just Twilight fan fiction, and it's just being repurposed for the same reason. And there was like a movie, I just thought about this. There's a movie, I think it's called Honora, and it won the Oscars. I guess swept the Oscars this year. Nobody watched the Oscars, but it was a film literally about a stripper that meets like a rich Russian like foreign guy who is basically Pretty Woman but like sluttier, and it's basically just that taken, and it's all of this is this kind of weird wish fulfillment for 304 women that are like, oh yeah, I have like, if it's a stripper that finds a good man and they fall in love and they get married like really quick, and like I don't know where it goes from there, but the point is there is this fantasy of finding a high status man, and he for a while but eventually caves and gets with him, and that's kind of like that is the fantasy, and Manifestelle she's basically doing a self-report.
Well, Pretty Woman was actually I enjoyed it, but part of that was that the Julia Roberts character was actually charming. She was charming, and she was funny, and she was quirky, and she had a personality, and and it's like, okay, I can enjoy that, and I don't like, but Bella, or whatever the fuck her name is in Twilight.
Bella Swan.
She.
You never read those books, Karen?
I've never read them, but I have heard so many complaints from thoughtful sort of thoughtful writers of romance and fiction, right, and critics of it, right, thoughtful ones, that she's just basically a cardboard cutout. She's there for the reader to insert, and so she has to be nondescript. She has to be to have no personality, because if she had a personality, the reader wouldn't be able to insert herself into the character, into the role. So
yeah. Okay, but let us, because I know.
Right.
I know.
Yeah,
I'm
my
running out of time
battery's got 16 minutes left.
All right.
Okay, let's finish this.
Zeranx gives us another super chat and says, for $2, I was without hobbies, not watching TV, and bored. Not an excuse, but okay. All right, let's move on. Oh yeah, I'm gonna jump ahead. Actually, she just goes into like her, unless you want to hear like her thing about Twilight, but I think you basically already hit it on the.
Only if it includes any kind of realistic self-reflection of what she was and why the book appealed to her.
No, she basically talks about how Bella's identity revolves around Edward. Again, I think that's a media literacy problem, but
yeah, that Edward's identity revolves around Bella.
Yes.
Yeah.
Exactly.
Like, seriously, guys, like what are you guys talking about?
Bella's identity revolves around the reader, whoever's reading at the time.
Yeah. Like, are you freaking nuts that Bella has no identity because the identity is supposed to be that of the reader, and Edward has no existence outside of Bella?
Yeah.
It's
No, I know exactly. All right, let's listen.
Romance novels, they tend to glorify toxic relationships because a toxic relationship is better than no relationship. Instead of describing possessiveness, jealousy, and control as the unhealthy behaviors that they actually are, we interpret this kind of behavior as romantic because,
oh my god, he's so scared of losing her.
Instead of seeing emotionally unavailable and brooding men as people who might not be ready or equipped to be in a relationship, we'd rather see a woman's love transform and fix them, a la,
I can fix him.
And this does lead women into thinking that
I can fix him
whenever they see a fixer-upper man, instead of recognizing that someone's personal development is not our task, especially a full-grown adult man's.
Okay,
like, he has to
please.
want that for him.
All right. You guys wanting dark triad men has nothing to do with the patriarchy. In fact, the patriarchy that you described, the kind of expectations put on women, is to get them away from any kind of situation with a dark triad man.
Yeah.
That's all on you. Like, women just, for whatever reason, they just love themselves some sociopaths. So all of the crap that Edward Cullen got, that made him attractive to the female audience, who are literally attracted to aspects of sociopathy in men. And
narcissism. Yeah.
And narcissism. What you would term patriarchy does is it tries to raise women or girls in such a way that they start to realize that the upstanding man with personal virtues and values and a sense of responsibility and conscientiousness is more attractive than the dark, brooding guy who will leave you with a black eye as much as kiss you. Right?
Yeah, like Gilgamesh at the start of the epic is more attractive than Gilgamesh at the end of the epic.
Yeah, but you need to raise girls with expectations and priorities that make them realize that dark triad men are not attractive. Yeah. Or they are attractive, but they're going to ruin you. I think that's what the whole ruination of women is about. It's basically saying, you got something that this dude can take away from you. Don't let him. Go for the guy who's conscientious, hardworking, wants to build a community, that kind of thing, right?
Yep.
But women want the drama, though. That's why they read these books. Like, she's saying it shouldn't be, but then there's no plot at all. Women want the men that need them. Like, what is 50 Shades of Grey about? Is the broken baby bird that also happens to be a multi-billionaire with a huge cock. And he needs, Anastasia Steele to save him. Yeah, it is a power fantasy, exactly.
For women.
That she is going to, for women, exactly, 100%. An extremely powerful, dangerous man that's like a dark triad man, but there is a good man underneath, and only this woman can save him from himself. It is like Beauty and the Beast.
This one woman.
Well,
this one woman
the
Yeah.
Disney adaptation of the original, because the original was not like that. But
No,
But
I
yeah,
mean, man, I was thinking about the TV show with Ron Perlman.
so she's taking a female power fantasy, which is this
Mhm.
idea that you can reform the dark triad man and somehow turn him into, without losing attraction to him, by the way.
Yeah.
This is the other thing. Turn him into that conscientious servant, right? That's the power fantasy. And she's looking at that and she's saying patriarchy did this to us. No.
Yeah.
No, if anything, patriarchy would tell you, or patriarchy, or expectations, traditional expectations based on women would try to move you away from the dark triad man and not involving yourself with them at all. That's your power fantasy. And again, like what Karen said earlier, there's a lot that women need to look in the mirror and take responsibility for here and stop blaming it on men
Or patriarchy.
or patriarchy. Okay. We have a little bit more?
Well, I mean, she just kind of says that he should be fixing himself before he meets a woman or something like that.
Yeah.
But of course, she doesn't
if
understand that women
if
get
he
bored.
did-
There
if
isn't
he-
anything to fix.
Yeah, if he did that, no woman would want him. Right.
Mhm. Mhm.
Yeah, dark
So-
triad
Exactly.
man is not going to fix himself because he's already getting your attraction. Like,
Yeah,
why would
he's like Casanova, right? The dark triad man is Casanova, and he's getting laid left, right, and center,
he's-
and he doesn't have to like commit to any one woman, and so like basically, you're looking at if women are throwing themselves at dark triad men, and then like she's gonna get, even if she marries him, right? She will soon be bored by the fact that he's no longer a dark triad man.
Well, he still will be, but she'll be upset by his behavior. If he genuinely is a dark triad man, she'll become upset with his behavior. But the other thing I wanted to point out is when she says a fixer upper, because we have been party to the extended universe of Manifestelle terms, she means a man who's like still going through med school, Karen.
Oh, for Christ's sake.
She doesn't even really mean a psychopath. She means a guy.
He's not quite
hasn't
on the bar
graduated
yet. He hasn't joined the bar association.
He's not past the bar. He hasn't gotten a partnership in the high-powered law firm that he's employed at.
Oh, for God's
Like,
sake.
basically, Manifestelle wants to marry a man 1 second before he rolls into his grave, and then she can
Mhm.
inherit his billions.
She wants to be like that chick who was a stripper, wasn't she? Who married
Anna
that
Nicole Smith?
Yeah, Anna
Anna
Nicole
Nicole
Smith.
Smith. She was a Playboy playmate, and she was a
Yeah.
guest model. But yeah, totally a stripper.
Yeah, and it's just like, yeah, no, okay, that's. I mean, if you look like Pamela Anderson or whatever, or Anna Nicole Smith, you can manage that, maybe, 1 out of every 100 times, right? But
Mm-hmm.
but yeah, no, most women are never in the way of those men, right?
Nope.
I mean,
and
like
he's
this is
not either.
this is why you literally had the idea of the MRS degree, right? Where you go to school, go to college, and you meet a man and you get married while he's still, while he's still in school. You put your school career aside, you have your kids, you go back, you finish your schooling, right? When your kids are in elementary school, and then you pick up your career, right? And that's how you do it. And that's generally, it's a good strategy, because you're putting yourself in the way of men who are going to be successful, and you help them become successful by performing emotional labor, I guess, right? And then you end up in a committed marriage, right? You don't get to just have the perfect man without contributing anything to how he got there.
Yeah. Well, that is what she expects.
He has to build himself up. He has to really just like become he has to become Elon Musk. And only then when he's a billionaire, will you deign to consider him not a
Karen.
fixer-upper.
No. He, yeah, sure, Elon Musk or any other billionaire man, but not until the moment he's about to be dead. She wants to marry a billionaire the instant before he dies, because he does not want the man.
Yeah, she just wants his bag.
She just wants his bag. And look at those okay, I'm gonna be petty, Brian. Look at those cold, soulless eyes. My
like a doll's
gentleman.
eyes.
Yeah. Or crab's eyes. A crab's
You
eyes.
see his eyes like a doll's
Look at that.
eyes.
Hey guys, this is what you can get if you just
Actually,
make yourself good enough.
You know what? I forget who it was on Patrick Bet-David's podcast, and he got the guys on the panel to make some facial expressions, and he was like, okay, that's like when you frown, right? You get the crease between your brows, and like everything is like, it looks like a genuine frown, right? When you smile, it looks like a genuine smile, right? Sociopaths have to practice in the mirror, and they can never quite mimic it. And if you see a perfectly unlined face, right, that is expressionless like this, you're probably dealing with somebody who has to practice in the mirror.
Really?
Yeah,
Oh,
the
that's
quote I was
interesting.
trying to say is it's from Jaws. You know the thing about a shark? He's got lifeless eyes, black eyes like a doll's eyes. When he comes at you, doesn't seem to be living until he bites you.
Yeah, guys,
Roll
you can be a billionaire and earn yourself one of these.
Yeah,
Like,
there's
honestly,
definitely.
a love doll probably would have a more intimate expression on its face. At least it doesn't look like it's about to take a chomp out of you every time she's not talking.
Okay,
Right.
device will power down soon. If I drop out.
All right, are we done?
Well,
or are we
could be done. She basically says that women have to write new fiction that's somehow doesn't include men in it. So
yeah,
I don't know.
romance fiction without men. No, let's hear it from her.
Well, I mean, this is like a build up to it. I don't have the actual quote. We have to look through the
Interest.
All
And
right.
another
Well, you
beef
guys,
I
I'll
have
leave you guys
with
to
the
it because my
romance
computer's
industry
about to die.
is the commodification of romance. And
well, I mean,
Yeah, this is a whole nother introduction to the topic.
let's just
Okay, so that's the sum total. The problem with romance novels, according to Manifestelle, is that there are men in them. That we should be replacing the men with everything that the man does and provides the female character, but no actual men, and then it would be perfect. I don't know how you do it. Like maybe she gets romanced by a disembodied spirit. Doesn't exist, or maybe what ultimately Manifestelle is groping for is her own agency, but she will never recognize it because it terrifies her.
All right, I'm done here, people.
All right,
yeah,
gotta go.
Goodbye,
Bye-bye.
Karen. All right, so do you have anything further you want to say, Brian?
No. I mean, I'm okay with us getting rid of romantic love, because I don't think it's necessary. I think it's like it's a kind of a made up thing, and it's just for women at the end of the day. So if Manifestelle wants to help with that, I will co-sign on that. I think that romantic love is where you get this kind of like concept of chivalric love. I'm not saying like I'll put it another way, okay? I don't mean that men and women shouldn't like, try to come together and love each other, but I think romantic love is a kind of scam that people like Manifestelle and various like, I don't know, corporations, they partake in to try to make a buck and exploit men. And if it all went away tomorrow, I'd be okay with it, because men and women would still fall in love, find each other, get married, all that. In fact, it might even be easier because then women wouldn't have crazy expectations. So yeah, I mean, I think that it's kind of like this weird fiction that women like to think about because they like to look at it as something they benefit from. Yeah, I think we could do without it, so it's okay. I mean, what's happening now is, I think, the product of it, like the landscape of dating and courtship as it stands, like where it is right now. I think that's a product of this concept, this modern concept in particular of romantic love, which is something that women have been basically like trying to normalize, and it changes their expectations from men. It changes their expectations from what it means to be a girlfriend, a wife, a mother, you know, and all of that. And if it all was gone, I think that there would be women that would stick around and form families, but they wouldn't do it for selfish reasons. Because I think that romance to women is a selfish thing. And you know, men want to be good to women, I think. And they want to treat them well, and they want to, like, you know, be good husbands and supporters and you know, and providers for their families. But yeah, romantic love doesn't do them any favors. I think that's when Peter Wright, is it Peter Wright? When Peter Wright talks about gynocentrism, that's what he's talking about. And I think that is something that we should at the very least be criticizing. So yeah,
well,
I mean,
okay,
go ahead.
I'm going to give an alternative view. Now, I definitely will criticize the kind, whatever the hell Manifestelle wants, which is basically romantic love without any kind of recognition of men at all. Like, absent the man. Somehow she wants a romance, what makes her feel desired and loved and everything else, but without having to involve a man at all. So that isn't even romance. That's just narcissism. And honestly, I really quite enjoyed that one quote unquote romantic novel in which the woman actually went on a hero's journey to save the man she fell in love with, because he was a captive and he was compromised actually mentally by his captivity. And I think that there's a place for that. And honestly, I don't want to start talking about getting rid of genres.
I'm not saying that.
Because once you start once you start doing that, like once you start getting or suggesting removing human expression instead of saying, well, yeah, romance that does whatever it is Manifestelle wants, which is just exclusive focus on the woman, to the exclusion of the man, you know, it's not particularly healthy. And she just seems to be saying, well, let's do Twilight, but make it even more just focused on the female character with no relation to the male whatsoever. So I want a romance that makes me feel loved and desired in the center of attention, but I don't want to have to deal with a man. I don't want the man to be involved at all. I don't want it to come from a man, which is insane. It's like that is the absolute essence of her insanity. And I would like to say that the women who are doing that kind of whatever it is are not in the same category as that one author who wrote the science fiction romance about the woman moving hell and earth to save the man that she fell in love with. I would say that was a different category of writing, and I wouldn't want to necessarily get rid of that. You know what I mean? Because I found it edifying and not in that kind of solipsistic way.
Yeah, but I mean, isn't it also true that is an extremely rare example of something that goes against the grain, whereas 99% of romance is exactly the kind of stuff that Manifestelle and so many women like? So when I say it needs to go, I'm talking about that. And I'm not even really talking about writing anything per se, because I don't want to censor anything, but I think it's the attitude that has to change. Yeah, okay.
The attitude has to change, but when the attitude changes, then the romance will change. So, I mean, censoring it, or maybe that wasn't what you're getting at. Maybe we're getting rid of the attitude. But the other thing is that,
yeah, go ahead.
If we're going to start talking about forms of expression, you know, causing damage to relationships, I think then we also have to introduce the conversation about porn. And it's like, I think the better conversation to be had there is, why are people doing it? And for men, I think it's tremendous frustration. For women, I think it's, I don't know, it's the end of this kind of belief about ourselves that women exist as receptacles of service and being saved. And we just need to get out of that. And there's nothing, I don't think there's anything that men can do to get women out of it. They have to choose for themselves to start taking the first steps out of being a fucking receptacle.
Mm-hmm.
You know, so I don't know. Maybe I was misunderstanding what your point was. So
I mean, like, well, Manifestelle's, I'll just say last thing about this. So her conclusion is that the way we write romance has to change. We have to redefine love. We have to redefine romance. That's what she is saying. And I think that there are probably a lot of women that would agree with most of what she is proposing, but the way that she wants to change it essentially destroys it, of course, right? And I'm saying that that's okay, because people who are doing like real work will just keep doing real work. So I want to see that to its conclusion.
Maybe what you're thinking is that it'll burn. It's like a forest fire that burns itself out.
Yeah,
Like,
if it even happens, because at no point does she actually challenge like women's taste, right?
No.
She just sort of says, "Oh, it isn't
forces
woman-centered enough," right?
Yeah, yeah. So make it so woman-centered the man doesn't even exist in it.
Yeah, I mean,
Let's see
like,
how well that does. Let's see
death-
how well that does.
yeah, when I think of death as more of a change than an erasure. So like, you know, like in tarot, the death card doesn't mean death, it means change. And so because it will not be the same as it was, so essentially the old whatever dies and then there's a new thing. And I hope Manifestelle follows through on that, because I think that's going to kill whatever it is she's trying to do.
Yeah.
And there'll be like whatever is actually speaks to people will be the thing that persists. But so that's it.
That's a great idea. Like, yeah, sure, go forth and make your romance that that manages to make women feel special and the center of attention and desired and loved, and have men sacrifice for them, but no man. Like, just manage to make it's like that feeling like we talked about before with dark matter, the feeling of rightness, you know, not being right or not pursuing the truth, but just feeling like you're right. That's what he was trying to give to his audience, just the feeling of being right. She wants to give women the feeling of being sacrificed for, but without men. Jesus Christ.
All right.
Sorry, I took the Lord's name in vain.
It's all right.
Okay, so we got a super chat from Zaranx.
Yeah, I got a super chat from Zaranx for $2. He says, Manifestelle wants the transhumanist utopic future. Oh no, the Handmaid's Tale plus transhumanism. It's the end.
Yeah, she wants the mood
twice.
organ.
It's double bad. Okay. So that's it. Thank you.
She wants the mood organ from Do Androids Dream of Electric Sheep, which didn't end up in the actual film, but from the mood organ from that movie. She wants to be able to dial up the feeling of being desired. Okay. And that's it. Yeah.
Yep. So, are we ending the show? Because I got to go pick up Lindsay pretty soon.
Yeah, like I think that we've pretty much covered everything that we could possibly squeeze out of this squeeze spawn. I don't know. All right. So if you enjoyed the show, you want to send us a message, you can do so at feedthebadger.com/justthetip anytime after the show is over, because it's going to stay live. And we get the full benefit of whatever funds you send, and you get the benefit of sending your comment not through YouTube's comment thresher system. I'm actually wondering if maybe I should merge the support and the just the tip, so that it's a little bit more streamlined. Hey, you can tell me in the Discord if you're in it. And also, if you want to support the show, you can go to feedthebadger.com/support. And so those are the ways that you can help us. The very best. And back to you, Brian.
Okay, well, if you guys like this video, please hit like, subscribe if you're not already subscribed, hit the bell for notifications, leave us a comment, let us know what you guys think about what we discussed on the show today. There's a link to the full video in the description if you don't watch it yourself. And please share this video, because sharing is caring. Thank you guys so much for coming on today's episode of the Rantzerker, and we will talk to you guys in the next video.
Men's rights activists are machines. dude. Okay? They are literal machines. They are talking point machines. They are impossible to fucking deal with, especially if you have like a couple dudes who have good memory on top of that too. Holy shit, you're fucked.